Greetings and salutations, friends and gamers of all stripes, and good morning as well. Well, morning for me anyway. Excuse me. I literally just got done eating breakfast, so I'm a little, I might need to pause every now and then to take a sip of water and wash down what I ate. Just a protein bar. But I digress. Today, on this rambling, roaming vlog or D&D discussions, I haven't decided which yet, and really it could be either one. I'm actually going to be making a response video to Andrew Armstrong of DawnforgedCast. The other day, he released a video entitled Dungeons & Dragons is not a role-playing game. No, just like he said, I'm going to tell you right now, don't get triggered by his title. It's not a hard and fast thing that he's saying. He's using a little bit of clickbait there to get people in. You know, can't fault him for that. It's a method that works, even if it is a little bit, even if it is a little bit, overdone these days, in my opinion. But nevertheless, due to some recent events, some recent experiences playing D&D that he's had, he has started the process of questioning whether or not, when we play D&D, those of us who are heavy role players, as he is, as I am, are actually playing during those times when all we're doing is role-playing and we've never once rolled the dice. Now, this is not a line of thinking that he is set in stone with. And just like his video, I'm going to do this off the cuff. I want this to kind of just be a loose stream of consciousness, my first impressions kind of response, but I will be refining this and going into better detail about it in a later video, kind of exploring this concept more deeply, because I believe this is an interesting concept and one worth talking about. So, his argument, or his line of thinking, is that the way D&D and similar games, Pathfinder especially, it would be the other big one this would really apply to, the way they're described in their rule books, the way that they come across, is that the game aspect of it comes from rolling of dice and, the use of your different abilities. But those of us who are heavy role players, we can sometimes have sessions, entire sessions, where the die are never once cast, where nobody rolls a dice, nobody makes an attack, nobody uses a skill. Some sessions literally can be just couple hours of players sitting there in character talking with each other. It's perfectly fine. That happens to me every now and then. It happens with Andrew very regularly. But he started thinking about this, as he explains in this video, he started thinking about this for a couple of reasons. One, because of a couple events he encountered at Gen Con, and well, actually that was the second reason, but two on my list is he actually works as a professional paid GM alongside his YouTubing, and the group that he's GMing for, that he's being paid for, they're not into roleplay. They're into the number crunching. They're into the dungeons and the leveling up and the looting, all that stuff. For lack of a better term, the more gamey side of the game. Which set him to thinking recently, well, are we really playing then D&D when we're role-playing? How much am I really playing D&D? How much can I really say I am a D&D player when most of what I do is role-play and doesn't really involve getting involved with the mechanics of the game? So, I want to actually start this off by mentioning the analogy he uses. And I want to mention the analogy he uses because as an off-the-cuff thing that he did, as is to be somewhat expected because it was off the cuff, the analogy he made didn't quite fit. Sorry, Andrew, but it didn't. Your analogy was a basketball game. Let's say that you have someone who's never played basketball before. You're taking a new player in, they've never played basketball before. Your friends ask him to play. Hey, we're playing basketball this week. You should join us. I've never played before. Oh, don't worry about it. You can read up on the rules online and join us. It'll be fun. You think you'll like it. You should give it a shot. So he does. He goes, he reads up on the rules, and that weekend he joins him. He's dressed in his basketball gear, his tank jersey, his shorts, he's got the shoes, he's got the ball with him, he's dribbling. But everyone else has showed up in costume, and they're sitting in the bleachers talking to each other. So he's like, it's a little weird. He goes up and he starts talking about, hey guys, what's up? So I read online we should start, drilling. Should we start drilling? Oh, we already are. So you guys are just sitting there talking. Oh, yeah, that's how we drill. So they're talking, explaining before I started playing basketball, I was the son of the blacksmith and this and that. Very D&D, very fantasy RPG style introductions. And the new kid eventually is like, hey, when are we going to start playing? He's still sitting on the bleachers, still dribbling the ball. And they tell him, oh, we are. Oh, but I read that this was about, basketball, you're supposed to, dribble and toss the ball. Well, we only do that when we feel like it. There's a huge flaw in that analogy. And that is the fact that in basketball, that kind of social interaction is not intrinsic to the game. Now, arguably, in D&D and Pathfinder, social interaction on the level of high roleplay is also not intrinsic to the game. However, social interaction, verbal communication, visual communication, written communication, face-to-face interpersonal communication of some kind is intrinsic to how tabletop RPGs are played. That is not the case with a sport like basketball. The analogy doesn't work there because that social element isn't required to play the game, but it is required for D&D and Pathfinder. So, you can sit there and you can roll the dice all you want for D&D. Let's say you are sitting down, you've got a group of 4 people, and you're all sitting down rolling dice for D&D. You're rolling dice. You're not saying anything. How are you going to know what's being rolled for? How are you going to know what's being done? See, therein lies the ultimate problem with this analogy, and why I think this line of thinking that Andrew has fallen into is a little bit flawed. Not entirely flawed, but a little bit. D&D, by its very nature, requires social interaction. It is designed to get people to sit down in the same place, be that in person or online, and talk their way through a game. The die rolls and the numbers, they provide the framework and the terminology that makes up that game, that makes up our understanding of how that game functions. But that game cannot function without that social aspect. Basketball absolutely can function without that social aspect because it's designed that way. Now, I don't want to get hung up on this analogy because that's not what this is about. My point with this is to show that the social side of things is always going to be part of D&D. More so than the dice rolling, because the dice rolling doesn't mean anything if we can't showcase what it means. And how do we showcase what it means? Through our interpersonal interactions. So, how would I rule then this idea of, or how would I argue this idea of, are we playing D&D when all we do is roleplay for a session? I would argue that yes, you still are. Because D&D at its core is not about the rolling of dice, the adding of numbers, and all of that stuff. That is the framework that holds its core. The core is the interpersonal communication that builds and fills that framework. That is where the game lies. Let's say, for example, let's take a video game, actually, for example. Let's say you're playing Street Fighter. Well, Street Fighter, obviously, is a fighting game. So, is Street Fighter the game? Is the game the pressing of the buttons? You need to press the buttons to make the characters do your actions. You need to press the buttons to activate your special moves and your combos. Is the gameplay the pressing of the buttons itself? No. The gameplay is using those button presses to activate your moves for the character on the screen. The gameplay is the positioning of your character on the screen, the selection of specific moves to counteract the other players or the AI's specific moves. The gameplay comes from the interaction on the screen, not the use of the device in your hands. The same is true of D&D. The gameplay, in the case of D&D and Pathfinder, comes from the interactions between the players and the other players, or the players and the GM, not from the rolling of the dice. The rolling of the dice influences that interaction, but it is not the source of that interaction. So, are you still playing D&D if you have a session where all you do is interact, where the dice are never rolled? Well, I would say yes. However, I can understand why Andrew might think, well, no, not necessarily. And why others might think, no, not necessarily. And there's a good reason for that, too. See, with D&D and Pathfinder, other role-playing games of that type, Savage Worlds, my favorite one, is included in this as well. Any tabletop RPG that is not specifically designed to be fully story-driven, like your Vampire the Masquerades or your Calls of Cthulhu, like a lot of your D6 or D100 based tabletop RPGs, wherein the dice rolls very much are meant to be secondary and just sort of, add to the story and alter how the story flows. Games like D&D and Pathfinder, where the die rolls are, for lack of a better term, let's say they're more dynamic as opposed to passive. I would say in a story-based game like a Call of Cthulhu, die rolls and the such are a little more passive. They are made as a response to your actions, as opposed to D&D and Pathfinder, like where they are more active. They are made both in response and to account for your actions. And I know that's not like, I know this isn't the best argumentation here. I'm just kind of going off the cuff with this. This is just sort of, a very bare bones kind of comparison. The basic idea is the die rolls are not as big a part of story-based games as they are games like Pathfinder and D&D and Savage Worlds. However, my point with this is the social aspect of it. It's not a one-to-one thing. The amount of times you roll the die versus the amount of times that you're being social and role-playing and doing the interpersonal interaction, no matter how light or heavy it may be, that isn't determinate as to whether or not you're playing D&D. You can have a session that is fully role-playing and still be playing D&D, just as you can have a session that is fully dice rolling and almost no role-playing and still be playing D&D. The reason for this is because that social side of things, that interpersonal interaction part, exists on a spectrum. And across that spectrum, you have the two sides. You have the side where you have multiple sessions that are full role-playing and very little dice rolling. Multiple sessions that are more like a Call of Cthulhu or Vampire the Masquerade style of play, where the story is much heavier and the dice rolling is considerably less. By contrast, you also have sessions and games that are considerably heavier on the dice rolling and the number crunching, and considerably lesser on the roleplay side of things, where characters will do things like, say, I want to intimidate this character, roll their roll, and that's that. And then there's everything in between that. See, the reason why I don't really think that the line of thinking Andrew is using is entirely accurate is because I don't think it fully takes into account this idea that in order for D&D and Pathfinder and the like to function, the interpersonal communication must exist. To what degree is going to vary depending on the group. Now, I've made this argument in a previous video, in my video about, which one was it? It was about elitism. The idea that D&D and Pathfinder and all these tabletop RPGs, apart from the ones that are very expressly meant to be heavy story, light dice rolling, they are malleable products. They are expressly designed to be played in multiple different ways to satisfy multiple different styles of play. And that is a large part of the reason why they have become so popular. They are very open-ended. That was, I believe, how I phrased it before. They're open-ended games. You know, and that's not just from, like, based on the fact that, like, oh, you know, it's the DM who's setting up the story. It's the DM and the players who are determining how things turn out, based not just on their dice roll, but on the actions they choose to make and how they choose to respond to the actions of the other players. It's very improvisational. It's very free-form in its style of play, and as such, it has to be open-ended. It has to be able to house multiple styles of play because everyone is going to approach a system like that differently. So, because of that, you can have groups that are super heavy on the dice rolling, and groups that are super heavy on the role play, and then super light on the opposite, and still be playing the same game. Now, Andrew makes a point in his video that games like D&D and Pathfinder specifically, they don't say anything in the books expressly about role-playing. Excuse me. Sorry. Sorry for that little pause. A little burp there. But yeah, the books don't expressly say anything about role-playing in them. How to handle role-playing, what role-playing is, you know, how, like, you have to use a voice for your character, that you have to speak in character. And that's because you don't have to do that. It's an option. It's an open-ended option. But the game does state quite clearly all of the rules, all of the mechanical functions in those books are optional. You can use as many or as few of them as you like, as often as you like, depending on what you need at the time. Those passages and the introductions of most of those books, particularly the DM's Guide and the Player's Handbooks, things like that, core rulebook for Pathfinder, that's what makes these games open-ended, and that's what enables them to have the ability to have games that are, on the one hand, almost entirely dice rolling and no role play, and on the other, almost entirely roleplay and little to no dice rolling. And at the same time, you can still consider those playing the same game. Because it is specifically designed for this. It's specifically designed to be flexible, to allow you to play your way. D&D, Pathfinder, Savage Worlds, GURPS, all these games like this. The rules in the book are not the game itself. They are the framework upon which you build your game. The game itself is the adventure, the campaign, the what have you, whatever it is that you are presenting to your players, that your players are engaging in, that the DM is engaging in with the players, and that everyone is involved with at the table. That is where the game lies. It is suspended in the framework. How much of that framework is needed to suspend it, that depends on your group and your preferred style of play. So that's my argument for this. Final reasoning for me, final ruling on this, I guess. Yes, you are still playing D&D if you're in a group that will have sessions that do nothing but role play and never roll a die. Just the same, you are still playing D&D if you're in a group that almost never role plays and pretty much does nothing but say, I'm using Intimidate, roll the dice. Oh, I want to attack this guy, roll the dice. The reason for that is because the system is specifically designed to be flexible and accommodate both of these and everything in between. So what are your thoughts on this idea, friends and gamers? Do you think that, are you like me in your thinking that you can have a game like D&D where you can have a group where it's entirely role-playing and you never roll the dice, or you very rarely roll the dice or interact with the character sheet in a mechanical way and still call it D&D, just the same as you can have a group that is constantly interacting mechanically with their character sheet but doesn't use any of it really for role-playing at all and still call it D&D? Or do you have to be interacting with the mechanics and the framework in the books to call it playing the game? Personally, I don't think you necessarily have to do it all that much to call it playing the game. Like I said, my thoughts are what's in the book is a framework to suspend the game you're building, to hold it up. How much of that framework you use is entirely up to you. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are on this. If you liked the video, make sure to leave it a like and subscribe if you would like to see more. If you want regular notifications, make sure that you follow me on social media. You've got links for that in the description down below. Furthermore, I am now on Patreon. If you like my videos and you would like to donate to me, you can find the link for that in the description below either. I'm not about to stop making these videos if I don't start making money off them by any means. My interest in this is to share my love of this hobby. That's why I started doing this. That's why I'm going to continue doing this. However, given the amount of time that I put into these videos each week, and given the amount of effort it takes, on top of the impact that it has on my personal life at home, specifically in terms of getting things squared away around my house and the time that it eats into being able to do that, as well as the fact that, expenses get driven up and sometimes you only need that little bit of an extra boost. Well, I figure, even though I didn't want to do it this early into the life of my channel, I might as well start it up. So yes, Patreon is live. If you think that my work is worth donating to, please feel free to visit my page, donate what you want. I'm not offering tier rewards or anything like that. The videos that I make, that would be, if you're donating to me, that's what you're donating for, is so that I can continue to effectively make videos, and that eventually, maybe, if I'm able to get enough support with that, I can start getting some better equipment and, improve what I'm doing here for you guys. But no matter what happens, these videos aren't going to stop coming. Like me or hate me, love what I do, hate what I do, you're not going to stop me. I'm making these no matter what. So, again, if you liked the video, leave a like, leave a comment below, tell me your thoughts, follow me on social media, donate to Patreon if you feel like that's something that's worth your time and worth your while. I appreciate every donation. I appreciate even if you can't donate, even if all you do is subscribe or leave a like on my video. Every bit of interaction, every bit of support, no matter how small, has my appreciation. I thank everyone who has stuck with me for these past few months with this little project of mine. And yes, with all of that now said and done, dear friends and gamers, oh, yes, one more thing. I've only got about half the videos up there currently, but I am now also on BitChute, so you can follow me there as well if you would like. YouTube is now no longer your only option to see my videos. If you want, follow me on BitChute as well if you prefer that platform. So now that I'm done, this really was very off the cuff. But now that that is all said and done, dear friends and gamers of all stripes, as usual, it is my sincere hope that you continue to roll high, role play well, and game on, no matter how it is that you like to experience these games. My name is GM Dave. I am your man behind the screen. Friends and gamers, have a lovely day.